whatever happens in life, whatever happens in your homeschool, it can look messy in one year and you can feel like you haven't done anything, but really you have, because they are living everyday life with you. And so, if you have to be a caretaker, remember that they're learning how to care and how to love, and they're learning godly things. And so as long as you keep your eyes on Jesus and you are teaching them the ways of the Lord and you are growing them, you're teaching them how to think, God is going to fill in, and they are always learning. There is never a time that they're not learning. It's all important, even those breaks, even those messy times.
Welcome. It's the Colorado Homeschool Podcast, interviewing experts, parents, graduates, all here to help you navigate this incredible journey called homeschooling. And if you're looking for resources, tips, and help, go to check.org. You'll find what you need. In the meantime, subscribe, follow along. Well, good morning. Hello. Welcome. We're so excited that you're here. I'm your host, Kasia Davis, and we have a fun podcast for you today. We have a panel of some great moms who we think are going to be fantastic at encouraging you and talking about the different methods of homeschooling. There's different styles, and maybe you didn't know that, and this is brand new to you. So hopefully we unpack a little bit of that, give you some information and insight into that. So will you help me welcome Yvonne Strachan, Tiffany Taylor, and Linda Kidder. Thank you, ladies, for being here. I'm going to let y'all introduce yourself. Yvonne, will you start? Just tell us a little bit about your family, your homeschool journey, and maybe what method you're going to kind of talk to today.
Oh, yes, absolutely. Thank you, Kasia, for having me on today. I'm so happy to share and encourage homeschool families. And I have 5 kids. I started homeschooling 16 years ago, and it's just been a blessed journey for me. We just love serving our community together, and I use textbooks with my children. And so that's been a journey in of itself, because it's kind of like, riding a bike. When you ride a bike, you have training wheels on and you're trying to start out, and it's difficult. And then you learn different tricks along the way and different ways to make things easier. So that's been my journey.
Oh, I love that. And I hope we do that today. Learn a little bit of tricks that people can apply and maybe test the water. So, Tiffany, can you introduce? Thank you, Yvonne. Thanks for being here. Tiffany, can you introduce yourself? Tell us about your family and your homeschool journey.
You bet. My name is Tiffany Taylor, and I'm married to Scott for 21 years. And we have 4 boys. They are 19, 17, 14, and 10. So, yeah, we're still in the thick of it, but we've graduated one. We're going to graduate another one next year. And yeah, we homeschool classically. I'm with Classical Conversations. I've been a leader with them since 2014. But yeah, I'm passionate about home education and just helping other people homeschool, no matter what style you use. I love homeschool.
Nice. I can't wait to hear more about what is the classical model. I feel like that's a big one that people talk about, but I don't necessarily know that I would be able to define it. So thank you for being here. Linda, will you tell us your story and a little bit about your homeschooling and what model you're going to talk to today?
Absolutely, yes. Hi, Kasia. We have 3 children. Our oldest son is 26, the second son is 24, and our daughter is 20. So we've graduated all of them and moved on to college. So that's been a great journey. And the method that I'm going to talk about today is actually unit studies.
Okay. Unit studies was my jam. That's really what I mostly did as a homeschool mom too. But I think what we'll get into and talk about is most homeschool families that I know tend to do a little bit of this and a little bit of that, and it kind of depends on the subject or the season of life. So let's just go in. I don't want to do like ABC 1, 2, 3, but let's kind of first define, what would you say? Let's go backwards. Linda, start with you. What is unit study approach, and if you know anything more about that definition and what that looks like?
Sure. I would say the most simplistic way to define it is that everything you're studying revolves around a theme. So sometimes there are particular curriculums that use a book and base everything off of that. I did it a little differently in that I chose a theme that I liked. So, for example, oceans, and then everything that we did, the books we read, the math we did, the science that we studied, all revolved around that theme of oceans. And so that really is the most simplistic way to define it, is that all of your subjects are centered on a theme.
Okay. Did you were you making your own curriculum, basically creating your own unit study, or did you kind of find something that told you what to do and you just followed that?
Well, I initially, because I started when our youngest was 4, or our oldest, sorry, our oldest was 4. And you may get into this later, but I was a reluctant homeschooler. My husband wanted me to do it, and I was not so sure that was a good idea. And maybe we'll talk about that later. But anyway, I was very unsure of myself, even though I was a college graduate. I had graduated with honors. Yeah, the idea of trying to teach my children was not, uh, yeah, not something I was confident doing. So initially, yes, I started with a curriculum. I wish I could tell you now what the name of it was. I don't even remember. But their method was to take a book, a particular book, and then every subject was centered around that book. And that was okay. But once I did that, I realized I particularly was suited more towards picking a larger theme and things that I thought would be attractive to my 4 and 2-year-old. And so, oceans, who doesn't love whales and fish and, sharks and things? So anyway, I thought that was going to be great. So we started with that. And then I also did what I called alphabet days. And so each day we celebrated based on the letter of the alphabet, because I was teaching my kids, right, the basic alphabet letters, what they sounded like. So today is A day. So we did all things A. We ate apples and apricots and, just did all things A. And then next day's B day. And so we would do, and so I was trying to teach them their letters and what they sounded like. But in the process of that, again, the unit being, we were studying all things B, right? So that was kind of how I approached that.
I love that. You said something that I say all the time to homeschool families, because it's not one size fits all. It's very unique. God made the body super diverse, right? And families are super diverse. So there is this understanding of yourself and your family and your kids and how they learn. So we're going to get into that. Let's finish the definitions, but let's come back to that for sure, because when you start thinking about different methods, a lot of it will be, well, what's going to make me as the mom sane and what's going to help my kids? So, Tiffany, will you tell us a little bit about classical conversations, or even just classical education, and what makes that? What is that?
Absolutely. So classical education, sometimes we think of classical education and we're like, oh, we just read classic books. And that's a big part of it, but it's not the whole, right? Classical education, like it sounds, it has its roots in ancient Greece, ancient Roman. And really, this is the way that humans learned until the progressive era, until the 1900s, when the Industrial Revolution came along. And we started compulsory education, and we changed our educational system. So, yeah, I think over time we have changed, especially in public education, right? We've changed our methodology to concentrate on utility, like utilitarianism. Like, I'm going to get an education in order to get a job. And I think we would all agree that that's not really what we want to do. Like, we're cultivating souls, and that's what classical education is about. It's about wisdom and virtue. And I know this sounds like aloof, but we contemplate truth, goodness, and beauty. What is true? What is good? What is beautiful? And because of that, I would argue that a classical education must be Christian, because truth is a person named Jesus Christ, right? And we can't pursue truth without Jesus. So I think that's a really important part of it. But yeah, classical education, we read great books, but we also, we're studying science and math and logic and Latin. Yes, we study
That's what
Latin
I
in
was going to
classical
say. That's what I know of
That's
classical
right.
education is the Latin and the logic and yeah.
That's
Okay.
right. Our little 4-year-olds can recite Latin endings and, it's good.
Which
But yeah,
helps you
really
be a
putting
great speller. Right?
that's the hope, right?
Yeah.
And really integrating all of those subjects together, knowing that God's in the center and God created all of that. We're
Okay.
going to pursue God through it.
Okay. And so did you start in classical conversations? No. When you started, what
No.
was tell me how you landed on I stay in this lane. I love this lane.
Yeah. We did some other things first. We did Sunlight. I'm an English literature major. And so I love literature, and Sunlight is book based. And I was like, yes, that sounds amazing. I think for me personally, and I still love Sunlight, but for me, as more of a type A kind of person, it made me stress about checking the boxes too much. And I felt behind. I had somebody tell me, maybe I've heard this quote. I heard it a couple weeks ago. And she said, in homeschooling, there's no behind except the one you sit on. Have you heard that one?
Oh, no, but that's a good
I love
quote.
that. So, yeah, we did Sunlight for a little while. And then we found something called Tapestry of Grace, which is classical. But, and I loved it, but we were doing it in isolation. And we're a family of introverts. And so I just felt like we had no community. So that's where classical conversations came in. I was like, we need community. So classical conversations, we meet once a week in community. And that solved that problem for us.
Okay. I love it. Thanks. Yvonne or Yvonne. I always say your name wrong. I'm so sorry. Will you tell us your story? And I know where you've landed, but tell us what you would define as a textbook education.
Yeah, a lot of people just think textbook education is just sitting at your desk and going through these textbooks and just checking the box, but it's so much more, and it's what you use. And for us, we wanted a Christian education for our children, and so we wanted to be able to integrate God throughout everything. And for me personally, when I started, my oldest child was in a Christian school. And so I didn't know how to homeschool. And I thought, oh, well, what curriculum are they using? And so then I called that curriculum to see if they had any homeschool curriculum. And they did. So I ordered it and I started that way. And it was just such a good guide for me at first on, how to teach that. And it really grew my faith throughout the process because I felt like I was learning alongside my children. And I feel like when you are teaching your children, that is exactly what you're doing. You're learning alongside them and you're growing alongside them. It's a lifestyle. Homeschooling is a lifestyle. So, as time went on, I learned, like I said, I took the training wheels off and learned a little more how to adjust my homeschool. And so it didn't revolve as much around textbooks, but again, around community. So we developed a community where we had art at our house every week, and then it switched to a friend's house, and we would meet with many families. And then now we run a homeschool group at our church, and so we meet once a week, and we at our church. But then we also have a hiking group and different groups like that. So we have our community, and then we can pour what we learned through our textbooks into our community because, what we're using in our Christian textbooks, we're learning that, in math, God created order, and we can look at math in an eternal way, as far as like, how many, trucks would it take to, go to the sun, if you stack them and different things like that and just make it bigger and better and more understanding that, there is a God and there is a God of order. And then in history, just learning about all the different leaders and everything that happens, um, we've learned that, God does put people in authority, but if you don't not follow God's ways, and this is throughout life, really, um, you fail. It's His plan, not our plan.
So they're
We have
biblically
plans, and it's
based. Yeah.
just, yeah. Sometimes we get upside down in our thinking, and I find that in my own personal life. If I don't have things aligned with the way the Bible has told us to have things aligned, like God first and then our family. And our family is our ministry. And a lot of people forget that. They think that ministry is out. And our family is our first mission. Our children are our first mission. We have to train them up in the Lord. Like in Deuteronomy, it says, train them night and day, right?
Yeah.
Write it
I
on your
love what you're
doorpost.
saying. Yvonne, what
So,
you're highlighting exactly what I hope we do today is all three of you talked about wanting God to be the center of what we're teaching our children, raising them up. And yet we choose different ways, right? And different structures. And Tiffany, you mentioned something about feeling like you were behind because there was so much. I guess that's just my personality because I was like, no, we don't need to do that. Like, you have to be able to do that, right? So,
yeah.
knowing yourself. So, can we talk about that? Like, what would you say are some of the strengths? And even how many of you guys cross over? Like, Yvonne, I used science textbooks, of course, and I use math textbooks and I use grammar textbooks. So, I still incorporated a lot of textbooks in my learning. And Tiffany, we did some Latin. My children did do the Latin root words, and then we changed to Greek root words, and so we did like a smorgasbord. And I think a lot of families will find that. But what do you think are some of the strengths of your style? And I'll just open this up to any of you guys. What would you say are some of the strengths, and could you identify some of the weaknesses?
So the strengths of textbooks would be being able to have a guide of what you can study each day and how to integrate God into that, and not having to work in the evenings or on the weekends to prepare your lessons as much. So for me, it's like an open and go, and I don't have to worry about it when I'm not doing the educational textbook part with my children. So it's just more fluid for me. And the other part of that is I do know now that I can go, okay, well, let's test, this in math and see if you know it. And if you do, I can move on and I can
Pass it.
open up a
Yeah.
lot of time.
Right.
And then I don't feel behind. And I know that most textbook publishers will say to complete 80% of your textbook. So you don't have to complete 100%. They don't complete 100% even in schools. And so, like you were saying, Kasia, is, you have to be able to be flexible in that and know that, hey, we don't have to do this. My child knows this. And be able to just go on and then make it more flexible. And so that's been a help for me. But I think that also can be a downfall for people. So sometimes when they use textbooks, like Tiffany was saying, is sometimes you feel behind and you feel like you have to check a box. And that is something that is very hard for people. If they can't get beyond that, checkbox type,
Mhm.
then maybe another method or incorporating other methods might be better in those ways because we can't just check a box. We have to integrate our homeschooling into our life and be able to be flexible with that. And I'll tell you a story is, well, two stories is like when my um, oldest was young, she really had a hard time. She'd take 3 hours on math, and I just didn't understand, like those training wheels were on and, I realized that I just needed to see what her strengths are and then speak to those strengths and then be very, be able to pivot. And then, in 2020, my mom hurt her wrist and her ankle, and we had to go live with her and do wheelchair transfers and, really take care of her, and I took my kids with me, and we had to be flexible in that. I mean, we did a little bit of textbook work that day throughout the day, but not very much because their hearts were being grown in a whole different way. And I think this is one thing I really want to speak to homeschoolers about is that, boy, they learn in that life, those life circumstances and especially those hard ones. I mean, they were with me and they learned what love looks like in a tangible way as we took care of grandma, and they loved it, and the funny thing is, it seems like a tragedy, but it was really a blessing, and, with my mom, I was telling her,
Boy, that's
"God's using
the
you to
motto of
fill those parts."
life.
Mhm. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Wow. Well, thank you. Tiffany, what were you going to add to what would you say would be some strengths and maybe some weaknesses to that method?
And I just want to add on what she said, like, I 100% agree. Like, we are homeschooling allows us to do our life and for our kids to come alongside us and be at our feet and watch what mom and dad do. And we're modeling for them, whether they see me reading my Bible in the morning or, reading a hard book or, whatever it is, they get to see us doing that. And I think some of the benefits of a classical education are doing hard things. Our our classical learners, they read original documents. We read the Constitution, we read Shakespeare, we read Homer, we read all of these things. And it's hard. Sometimes it's hard. And we're in a culture now where it's easy to just ask the internet or AI or whatever, like, give me a summary of that book, right? Um, and rather than wrestling through the book itself and actually thinking about it and having conversations about it. So I think that's the benefit, is just having those conversations. I love talking to my teenagers in particular about what they're reading and what they're learning. Hey, we were talking about philosophy and, what do you think about this philosopher's ideas and how does that influence us today? And how did it influence the
The
culture at the
dialogue, that's so good. Yeah.
Totally. Yes. That's the benefit, I think. And we're teaching them how to learn. We're teaching them how to ask good questions. That's a big part of a classical education. Is just using question. You probably heard of the Socratic method, and asking questions to find truth. And Jesus is at the end of everything, right? Like, it all comes back to the Lord.
I love that. Okay, Linda, your turn. What would you say are some of the pitfalls to being a unit study, and what are some of the perks?
I would say the main perk is that it's just flat out fun. It's
Yeah.
fun for them. It's fun for me. It's just flat out fun. So I would say that for me was the main perk, and also like it's not, especially when my kids were little, wasn't rocket science, right? Like you check out some books from the library on, again, I'll just stick with that theme of ocean animals, and then it's easy to take a tape measure out in the yard and measure out the length of an eel versus the length of a shark versus the length of a whale, right? So math, science, all, is all built right in. And so it didn't take a lot of brain work on my part, and I did want both for myself, again, because I was reluctant, and for my kids to want to love learning, right? That was really where I wanted to begin. Love the Lord and love learning about him and about what he created. And so that was really pivotal for me in the beginning. I will say that the drawback is the older they got, the more of a challenge I found it to be able to incorporate the kind of math and the kind of reading and things that they needed. I didn't know, but suspected from a fairly early age that all of our kids would be college bound. Both my husband and I attended college. We wanted to be prepared if that was the route they wanted to go. If they wanted to do a trade or be a stay-at-home mom or whatever, that's great too. But we wanted them to be prepared to do whatever they wanted to do. So we did take an academic approach from that standpoint. And so as they got older and needed some of the more complex subjects, I found it harder to work into a unit study. So I did eventually abandoned that method and moved on to some other things. But I will tell you, consistently throughout their education from age 4 to 18, two things I did always. One was Bible. That was a straight up class, and it was a class we started with every day. We did nothing while we ate breakfast. But besides that, we did nothing before we did Bible. Um, that was, and again, I wanted the kids to see this is primary, right? This is first and foremost. So yes, so that was great. The other thing that I did, and I can't remember when I started this, they were fairly young, but I did it clear through when they were 18, is we would all sit and eat lunch together at our kitchen table. And while they were eating lunch, I would read to them. So sometimes I read just fun books, but a lot of the time it was historical fiction that related because as they got older, I guess in a way I stuck to a theme in that we would do time frames, right, in history. So this particular year we're covering creation through Rome or whatever. And so we would read books that covered that time frame, good historical fiction, or biographies, or those sorts of things. A little bit borrowing from the method that Tiffany uses in that classical style. And surprisingly, I thought, especially my boys, when they were in their teen years, they would roll their eyes at me when I did that. They did not. They loved it. And they still talk about those books. We were just talking about some of them last weekend, and it created in them, I think, a love of learning. All of my kids love to learn and to read. They all read different genres. They don't, now that they're adults, they don't all like to read the same type of thing, but they all like to read. And so, and funny how me reading to them, even as teenagers, planted that seed in them, right? And they liked it, and I liked it, and we learned a lot together, and could talk about, as Tiffany mentioned, and even Yvonne, those. How does this apply? This character had a very difficult situation they had to navigate. How would you navigate that? What do you think they did well? Where did they fall down? Right? Like they maybe didn't do such a good job honoring the Lord in that conversation, right? And of course, not everything we read was either from a Christian point of view or about a Christian. And so we got to talk. How does that change our response? Right? What would we do as a follower of Christ? How would we represent him well in that scenario? And there's some tough stuff, right? Like life actually deals you a hard hand sometimes, and you have to decide, what kind of integrity am I going to walk in here? Our oldest son at 26 just had that situation and said, I feel like if I don't disclose all the information, I'm lacking integrity. And he could have withheld information and it would have benefited him, right? But he's like, I can't do that, right? And that's because as parents, homeschooling parents, you're laying the groundwork for that when they're 4 and 5 and 10 and 12 and 15, right? You are constantly, as Yvonne alluded to the Deuteronomy, constantly laying that stuff in them. And that's what I did love. Homeschooling was fun, but more than that, I loved the fact that I got to train the heart and mind of our kids, right? And not just academically train their mind, but train their mind for God, and to think, to be able to think critically about things, and to be able to think biblically about things.
Yeah, I love this. I didn't mention this when I did the introduction, but these three ladies are also homeschool group leaders, and you can find their groups on the directory, on the Czech homeschool group directory. And they all have a passion for helping. As you heard Linda say, she's not even homeschooling anymore. She still is very involved helping. And I really do love how you guys have all answered with a word of encouragement for somebody. So can you think about a time, and I don't know if I want to dictate who says, but if one person does, raise your hand and we'll know, a time that you had to pivot where you were like, I am losing my mind, or maybe it was just in one subject. And you mentioned sort of already, Linda, that you had to do that when they got older and kind of pivot towards more chapters, or kind of like a high school model, I'm assuming, right?
Yes, right.
So a come to Jesus moment and figuring out a different way to approach your homeschooling.
I would say for one son in particular, I'm like Tiffany, very A personality. Our oldest is much like me, learns like me. Our middle son, not so much. And so, oh my goodness. Yeah, he was a challenge. And so when I would be teaching something and he would not even be looking at me and be, building with Legos or drawing in the dirt or whatever, right? And I would get so frustrated and I'd be like, come on, and he would look at me and literally be able to recite word for word everything I'd said for the last 10 minutes. And that was a light bulb moment for me, like, oh my goodness. I, making this kid sit at the table for a lesson, I'm going to kill him, right? And me, because we're going to get frustrated with one another. I need to give him something to do. He is listening. but his hands need to be busy, and he doesn't have to be looking at me. He can be looking at something else. He is hearing me, and he is processing what I'm saying. So for me, that was it, not necessarily a pivot in my entire homeschool, but a pivot for him, right? That I needed to give him a little more freedom. Um, and anytime I made him give a presentation, he would pace back and forth, back and forth. And it drove me nuts. But I was just like, nope, stay calm, right? Like, it's just, he has to be moving. He has to be moving. So as he got older, he got better at being able to control that. And now he gives presentations regularly and he does great, right? But I had to initially allow him the freedom to pace back and forth
That's
as he was
good. That
presenting.
insight into your kids is so needed. What were you going to add to that, Tiffany?
Yeah, I would just say we, like Linda was saying, we didn't really pivot in our style of, what we've chosen, but in how I approach each kid is going to be different. And I bet we all have stories about that, just like you were talking about your middle son. My oldest and my second really could not be more different. My oldest is super quiet. He wants to be a librarian. Isn't that
Okay.
wonderful? He's an English literature major as well, and, but he's more reserved, and he's just kind of an old soul. And my second one, he's still on the introverted side, but, he loves to speak publicly. He's in, competitive speech and debate with STOA, and which is another great organization. Uh, but, and he loves to be on a stage, and you give him a microphone, and he's so excited, right? And they also had different, like pivoting where they are in math or, I think it was Yvonne who mentioned this, like if, if they get a concept, let's just keep going, right? And then you get to where, oh, okay, we might need to take 3 days on this one lesson because we're stuck, okay? And that's true for all homeschoolers, right? We have to be watching for that and able to pivot with our kids and meet them where they are, and just tailor the education to what they need.
Right. Yeah. Yvonne, go ahead.
Oh, yeah. So I just wanted to add to that is each of our kids are uniquely created by God. And it's such a blessing to be home with them because we get to see firsthand day and night how they are created and then speak to that. And so I had similar experience to Linda where my middle son could not sit still at all. So I had to really, really work outside of the box. And so some of the things that we did was, use your Nerf guns to shoot the words as you say them and, really add a lot of action for him. He wanted to do all the action things. And as he's grown, he's so different than my other kids. And as he's grown, he's kind of engineering minded. And so he clicks with other engineering minded type kiddos and not, a lot of the typical kiddos that you have around. And so just finding his groove and then surrounding him with his interest and his people has really made a big difference in his life. And he's just really set up to just, go into that engineering field with some of the extra experiences. And like with my daughter, she changed many times of what she was interested in. And one of the things that we did was she baked cakes and she learned how to do these really fancy cakes and then start her own business. And she did that from when she was 12 and she still does it today. Um, and she's 20, she'll be 21. But one of the things that she was interested in was that. And then another thing that she was interested in for a while was flying. So we got her into flying and she did gliders and all those types of things. And so it was really fun for me as a homeschool mom to look at their interests and then just adapt what we were doing to those interests. And, really the reality is God created each of us unique. He created each of our kids unique and we get to see it and really grow with them and, see their experiences. And, one thing I have to say is those extracurriculars that they're interested in, that is their interest and that ends up typically kind of where they're going to be going in life. And so as you're speaking to that, I have another daughter who loves singing and so she sings at church in the middle school service. So she has a great
I
time doing that.
love
So,
so
yeah.
much. What I'm hearing from all of you guys is it almost doesn't matter like what method you're picking for homeschooling. Maybe you pick a method that suits you as the mom the most, right? Like if you're going to be the one who wants to do all the fun, or if you need the structure of a textbook, or maybe you want the Socratic discussion that comes with the classical, whatever suits you, but you're still ultimately going to have to fine tune and make your education individual, right?
Yes.
Because do you guys talk to new homeschoolers all the time? The first question that I'm always asked is, what curriculum should I use? And I feel like that's it's important, but it's like the third or fourth thing you need to know. You need to know why you're homeschooling and write out your vision, right? And then when you get to picking the curriculum, it's almost like, anything could work. Anything could work. The library could work if you were intentional and you knew what you were doing, right? Because that's what I'm hearing from you. Am I wrong? Or I see head shaking, but do you guys agree that really your method is maybe secondary to your education? It's more about the relationships and the fine tuning?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah, I
And
love it.
Yvonne, you said something that was just so great, and I 100% agree. That we have been given our children. They are uniquely created for us, and no one knows them better than us. And so we are the best to educate them.
Yeah. It's so true. Trust God. I know when you started, Linda, you said that you're a homeschool or a college graduate who graduated with honors and you felt incapable. And that's not uncommon. We hear that. I hear that constantly. Raise your hand. Do y'all hear that from homeschoolers? I could never. I'm not qualified. And I just feel like, why do we believe that lie? For goodness sakes. And you said it too, Yvonne, you learn with your kids, even things, because I like to tell people I was the smartest dumb person ever. Like I was a straight A student. I got full ride scholarships for chemical engineering. Like I was going to college for brainy stuff. And then the second I didn't need it, it was just gone. Like I knew how to memorize for the tests, but I did not grow up in the same education style that I did with my children, teaching them how to think, teaching them how to apply it. So it doesn't matter, right? We can redeem. Who says that? I think it's Classical Conversations. Doesn't she say that, the founder, that we could home education is redeeming two educations, our own and our kids?
Yep.
Yeah. Oh, I love it. Guys, every single thing that you guys have said, I'm like, oh, I want to dive back in and do it. My children are adults. So I have grandkids who are studying to homeschool, but my journey is finished. So well, guys, I love this. Somebody wanted to add something?
Paige, I just wanted to say that what you just said is the reason we feel incapable of teaching our children, because my story is identical to yours.
Yes.
I memorized a lot of facts. I was really good at that for the moment that I needed it. But
Yep.
when thinking about trying to teach my children something I could no longer remember and didn't really ever know, right? Like I memorized it for a short period of time. I didn't know it. Like that, I think that is the story of 90% of us. We feel incapable because we realize all we did was memorize for a test.
And then
that was
forget.
it.
Yeah,
Yes.
exactly.
Yes. And so
Yeah.
we don't feel smart or capable. We know we were good at a skill set, right?
Yep. Yeah. It's so
was,
true.
as Tiffany mentioned, utilitarian, right? Like it served a purpose. It got us good grades, but oh my goodness, we didn't learn how to think.
Yeah, I know. I'm excited for the homeschool movement, and I'm glad to see it growing. And I just want parents to find, that's why I wanted to do this method, because I just want them to go, if something's not working, you can tweak, you can try a different method. You can try, if you're losing your mind, if you feel like I'm never doing it because, I was a homeschool unit study mom, but I remember when my father had cancer and we were his caretaker, I did not have time to plan all these fun things, which I was all about the building forts to, learn about the kingdom. Let's build a castle and figure out how to make a drawbridge. And let's do some, everything was tied to that. And I barely got anything done and I felt like a failure. So then we had to pivot and we had to totally do a lot of textbooks and that was okay for a season, right? So guys, this was good. But I want to close with what we ask every guest who comes on. What is one of your favorite, saying best is so hard because, there's lots of good advice, but one piece of advice that you would put in the top shelf that you would pass on, it could be related to this topic or not. And let's just start with you, Yvonne, and then we'll go through all of you.
Oh, sounds good. Thank you, Kasia. I just want to let people know that whatever happens in life, whatever happens in your homeschool, it can look messy in one year and you can feel like you haven't done anything, but really you have, because they are living everyday life with you. And so, if you have to be a caretaker, remember that they're learning how to care and how to love, and they're learning godly things. And so, as long as you keep your eyes on Jesus and you are teaching them the ways of the Lord and you are growing them, you're teaching them how to think and how to find information and, you know, speak to their interests and all those things. I mean, God is going to fill in, and they're always learning. There is never a time that they're not learning. It's all important, even those breaks, even those messy times. So I just don't want homeschoolers to get frustrated and go, oh, this year was just horrible. Next year is going to be better and we're going to make all these changes. I mean, just appreciate what they have learned, whether that is, being a caretaker or, helping out in serving or whatever the Lord has planned for you each day. It doesn't have to be a check the box or I've accomplished things. We always want to accomplish things. But, just know that the
Walk in
Lord
grace
is
with
working in their
yourself.
hearts. Mhm.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that was good. Thank you. Tiffany, what about you?
I'm going to be a big fat cheater and give you two. Uh, the first one is quick, though. It's find a community. Don't do this alone. We have all mentioned community, and Kasia said, we're all group leaders. Find your people and, do life with them. Homeschool with a buddy. Okay, and the second one is surround your kids with books. I know I've talked about reading a lot. All of us have today, and I just think it's so important. And even when we were on a budget, like we homeschooled with a library card, and we would go to the library, honestly, multiple times a week. But when I would go there, I would pick out, here are some kids' books on science, and here's some kids' books on, maybe it's biography or poetry or fairy tales, right? Good fiction books and literature, and I would just put them all on the shelf. And I didn't ever require reading. I didn't ever say, you must read 30 minutes a day. But they all read for hours a day, and they have for your entire life, right? And so I just give them a smorgasbord, and I'm like, choose something that, and I don't even say choose, right? They just know. They go to the shelf, and they're like, oh, that looks interesting. And that does it. Okay, great. That's a win. And we have built up our own personal library at our house. We have thousands of books in our house. We might be homeschoolers.
Yeah.
But
Yes. So
and
one thing I'm having a hard time getting rid of too is books.
no, don't get rid of them. So
I
hard. But
know.
yeah, used book sales, and the library has, you can get 50-cent paperbacks and stuff. So build up that personal library as you can.
Okay. That was good. Thank you. Linda, let's wrap it up. What do you have to say?
In regards to curriculum specifically, this is a conversation that I had this last year. I just want to encourage people to not be afraid to drop something that isn't working for you, even if it's mid-year. I mean, and people have two things. One, they feel like, oh, I've committed to this. I need to stick through. I'm a failure if I don't finish. No, you're not. If it's not working, it's failing you. For whatever reason, it just doesn't fit. Move on. Move on. And the other thing is the investment, right? And I realize a lot of us as homeschoolers are one income families. So to purchase a curriculum and then halfway through the year go back to our husbands and say, I need to purchase something different, that can be a really hard conversation. So a couple of things. One, again, the library is your friend. But secondly, your friends are also your friends. So Tiffany was talking about being in community. Our and their homeschool groups probably do this too, but our homeschool group owns curriculum that we loan out for people to be able to just peruse, right, and see is this a good fit for me. I mean, you don't keep it all year, but like you can at least get a look at it, right? And your friends too, they will let you use their curriculum that they're not currently using this year. They still have it, right? So So borrow things, look at things, don't be afraid. And it's a little bit like that idea of sunk cost, right? Oh, I've already sunk, $400 into this. I can't spend another $400. Well, one, again, maybe you don't have to. But two, even if you do, it's a good and valuable investment.
In the
If you
long
had a
time. Yeah.
Yes, and if you had a car that you had just bought, but it kept breaking down every day, you're not going to continue to try and drive the car. You're just going to get something different. It
Yeah.
just does not make sense, right? So don't be afraid to walk away from something that just isn't working.
Yeah.
So that would be my
Oh, I
advice.
love that. This is the first time we've had more than one guest on the podcast. So this was, I feel like, oh man, it would have been great to do one with each of you the whole time. So hopefully we dip our toes in this and we have a chance to come back to you guys. Thank you. That was a great close, great conversation. I am going to link little bios of all of our guests in the show notes, as well as links to where you can connect with them to hear more. So thank you, ladies, for joining us, and thanks for being here with us. Thank you so much for joining us today. The Colorado Homeschool Podcast is a ministry of Christian home educators of Colorado. We have been motivating parents to disciple the next generation by embracing home discipleship that is Christ-centered, parent-directed, and free from government control. We invite you to join us in this mission. If you want to support homeschooling in Colorado, go to check.org/donate. In the meantime, share this with your friends and make sure you subscribe. That really helps us. Thank you.
Brought to you by thepodcastupload.com, empowering faith-driven voices.